Hello and welcome. I am Jennifer Grant, Executive Director of Windsor County Partners. On behalf of WCP and its Board of Directors, I would like to welcome you to our first Candidates Forum for Governor of Vermont, focusing on Vermont youth. For 42 years, Windsor County Partners has been creating and supporting mentoring partnerships between caring adults and local youth. This work builds healthy Vermont communities. In our 4 decades, we have created more than 1,400 mentoring partnerships. WCP is now in its 5th decade, and as we take pride in our past success, we also wish to look to the future of Vermont youth. Abraham Lincoln called our democratic nation the last best hope on earth. As we gather today, we are celebrating democracy's rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and our freedom of assembly. We have invited the candidates for governor to show leadership and to help informing a vision for the youth of Vermont. The candidates and their campaign staffs are under tremendous pressures. I want to thank them for making the time for this important event. Their presence here today acknowledges that youth are not a special interest, but that Vermont youth will mature to be voters of all persuasions. Youth are the future of Vermont. In a moment, our moderator will introduce the candidates, but I first want to express our appreciation for those who made today's forum possible. A thank you to all of our volunteers who did everything from approaching advertisers for the program to moving chairs to baking cookies. Our team consists first off of WCP board members: Megan Culp, Donna LaFleur, Peggy Kehew, John Bastille, Lynn Morrell, and Bill Peterson. Also contributing to today's event were resource committee members, Cindy Bittinger, Laura Page, and Sue Lee, who donated her graphic talents. Mentors Judy Simon Boughton and Rob Anderegg also assisted. And a thank you to our newest employee, it's here somewhere, Julianne Harden. Julianne is in her 2nd week on the job and is already working her 2nd weekend on the job. And also to her husband, State Representative John Bartholomew, who provided our sound system today. We also want to acknowledge the businesses featured in your program for their support. And finally, we wish to acknowledge our Partner in Hope sponsors, Chelsea Greens Publishing and the Co-op Food Stores. We are honored to have as our moderator today, Anne Galloway. Anne is the founder and editor of Vermont Digger. She also serves as executive director of the Vermont Journalism Trust. A graduate of the University of Kentucky, she has worked as a reporter and editor for more than 20 years. She is a member of the Investigative Reporters and Editors. Thank you, Anne, for guiding today's forum.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I've never been in Damon Hall. This is a lovely spot here in Heartland, and thank you all for coming for what I think will be a very informative evening with our 2 candidates. And I just wanted to let you know a little bit about the format. We're going to give each candidate 2 minutes to make an opening statement, and then there will be some questions that have come from Windsor County Partners that I'll be asking, and they'll have 2 minutes to answer those questions, and then if they want to give a rebuttal, they can, and if they do so, since we haven't had a chance to meet yet, if you guys would look at me for a second. If you guys want to do a rebuttal, because usually I'm looking at you, but I'm not this time, so if you can just give me a little heads up, a little wave or something. And then you can each do a 1-minute rebuttal if you want, or not. But you each get 1 minute to respond. So someone might want to rebut a rebuttal, that's what I'm trying to say, which you can do. And then you have a 2-minute closing. So it's 2-minute answers each. Then 1 minute rebuttal if you want, that's optional. And then the rebuttal can be rebutted, okay? Does that make sense? All right.
For 1 minute.
Yes, for 1 minute. You want 1 minute extra, that's it. Now, I'm going to reach for my cell phone. I'm sure all of you have one of these babies, and I'm just going to make sure that it's off. Okay, it's off. That's good. All right, so I'm going to introduce Phil Scott to start, and Phil is our Lieutenant Governor. Currently, he's a Republican. He lives in Berry City, and he's a former state senator, and he runs a company called Dubois Construction. And Sue Minter is the former Secretary of the Agency of Transportation. She's also a former state representative, and she lives in Waterbury. And without any further ado, we will start with our first question. And we'll start, actually, we're going to start with opening statements, sorry. Sue, why don't you go first, followed by Phil.
Okay. Can I ask, is there a timekeeper?
Yes, right in the front row.
And you will give us 30 seconds and 15? Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for coming tonight to have this important conversation. Phil, thank you for coming. I had to debate an empty chair in Tunbridge the other day, and I always prefer to have a person, but when you're a governor, you have to show up. And I've had some experience debating empty chairs because I've raised 2 teenagers. Every leader brings her own experience to the job. And my own journey begins growing up in a family of 4 kids. I was the youngest and the only girl. I had 3 big brothers who loved to push me around and challenge me. And I think they taught me early in life how to stand up for myself and how to fight for what I believe in. And that's what I've been trying to do throughout my adult life. I'm a working mom with 2 wonderful kids. I've had the opportunity to work with Vermonters at some of our toughest times, as a legislator during the Great Recession, as the Irene Recovery Officer helping to rebuild roads, bridges, and communities after the worst disaster that hit our state in nearly a century. And as the Secretary of Transportation, managing a workforce of 1,300 people and balancing a $600 million budget. I know that the last year I've been traveling, visiting and talking with Vermonters from Bennington to Newport, learning about our challenges, but also our opportunities. What I know is that too many Vermont families are struggling in this economy. Vermonters want good paying jobs with health care. They want good quality schools and affordable college. They want strong and safe communities. I'm here to share my plans with you because as your governor, I want to make sure that we address our challenges and help make changes to make it possible for Vermont families and our kids to afford to live, work, and stay right here in the state we love.
Can I ask for a rebuttal?
Well, that's an unusual request, but sure, 1 minute rebuttal to the opening statement.
Thank you very much. I do want to rebut, and I just want to talk about Tunbridge for just a minute, because I've heard this in other debates about the empty chair, and that's going to be a recurring theme, but I think it's important to talk about that. When we started out this process after winning the primary, we decided to have some limitations. We received about 30 or 40 requests for some of these forums, and I think it's important that you have to set those parameters. As well, there's 3 candidates on the ballot. And I think I've made my whole political life about listening to others. And I think if there's 3 people on the ballot, I think we should listen to their thoughts and what their plans are and what their platform is. And I've heard from friends of mine who are Red Sox fans, rabid Red Sox fans, that have said, if you weren't on the ballot, I'd probably vote for Bill Lee. And I think if you're going to throw away your vote, or you're going to vote for somebody just because of a name recognition, because they played for the Red Sox, I think we ought to listen to what they have to say. So that's why we wanted to make sure that they listened to what that platform was. So there's my rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. Do we want a rebuttal to the rebuttal?
I do.
I have told everyone that asked that we would come. I've spent the last year traveling. We had over 30 different forums through the primary, many of which were with the Republican candidates, many of which Phil did not attend. I'm awfully glad I've been able to attend nearly everyone. I certainly didn't put any parameters around any time people invited me other than if I had a conflict. Frankly, I know there was a conflict at Tunbridge simply because Phil used that time to present his economic development plan. I think he might have been able to change that, and I think it's too bad. I loved being in Tunbridge. It was a wonderful experience to have that lovely tradition of debating at the Tunbridge World Fair continue, and I was glad to do it, even with an empty chair.
No rebuttals to rebuttal.
Well, now that we have that settled. Opening remarks, Bill?
Well, thank you very much for having us, and it's really especially nice to see some of the youth here in the room, although not enough youth, and that's part of our problem here in Vermont. And I'm very happy to be here to talk about some of the issues that are important to us and mentors. I grew up in Barrie, blue-collar community, and I'm very proud of my roots. My dad passed away from injuries he sustained after World War II in a D-Day invasion. He was a double amputee. I grew up in that atmosphere. And my mom was left to raise three rather rambunctious boys after that. And I reflect on how difficult that must have been on her. As you can appreciate, she needed support to get through those difficult times. And we were lucky to have a real large extended family to help. So as a young man without a father, I often looked to various role models throughout my life for advice and support. Amongst them, a guy named Richard Flies. He was my industrial arts teacher in high school, and he really cared. Made a great impression on me, and I remember getting hurt one time, and he called my house the day after, and that meant so much to me that he cared enough to find out what was wrong and what had happened to me. He also got me my first job at Lotus Lake Camp as a counselor and teaching woodworking at 15 years old. And he inspired me to become an industrial arts teacher later in life, going to UVM. There's also been others. My cousin Greg Shalhoub, he taught me how to hunt, how to fish, and gave me my love for motorcycles. But I was, again, fortunate to learn many of the lessons of hard work, resilience, and service from my mentors. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about all of those. But I'm running for governor because I think we need to grow the economy. I think we need to make Vermont more affordable. And I think we need to restore the faith and trust that's been lost across this nation and in this state for our public officials and in state government in general. And I believe that's essential as we move forward. So thank you again for coming today.
Thank you very much. The first question is, and this will go to Phil, what is your vision for students in Vermont?
Well, as I've spoken about, I think the first vision that I have is that we have more of our students here. The reality is our workforce is shrinking. We're educating 20,000 less kids than we were 20 years ago. We've gone from 106,000 to 86,000, and we're spending $1.6 billion to do so. So we need, I believe, to grow the population a bit. Our demographics are shifting. So I think we ought to set a goal of about 700,000 with an emphasis on those working age families in that 25 to 45 age group. My vision is also that each student has a high-quality education that gives them the tools to succeed in the future, and they have good opportunities, good job opportunities, so that they have the option of staying and building a career and a family right here in Vermont. Well, let's face the facts here. If I gave any of you, a lot of smart people in this room, if I gave you the charge of of educating 86,000 kids, and I gave you $1.6 billion to do it, I would dare say that we'd be doing it differently than we are today. We have to have the courage to look outside the box in order to deliver that. So in order to best prepare our students, we must embrace different learning styles, I believe. And as a hands-on learner myself, and I described that earlier, as someone who went to college to be a tech ed teacher, instructor, I'd like to see an expanding use of technical education programs in our school. I think they should be able to explore a bit. I was encouraged last week, I saw on WCEX, they had an article or a program about maker spaces in schools. And I thought that that's what tech ed used to be. And this was like tech ed on steroids, where they were introduced at different levels, different aspects of working with your hands and what you can do when you, and really exploring some of those possibilities. So the bottom line is that we must have the courage to look outside the box in order to provide a much different education for our students of the future.
Thank you. Sue?
So my vision for our youth, and I just have to say first that I am, as a mom of 2 kids, I have been involved in their education deeply. I was on the Early Childhood Learning Center board in my community of Waterbury. I was a volunteer, a classroom volunteer throughout their elementary education. I coached youth soccer for 13 years. I've been very involved, and what I believe is the vision for our kids, because our kids are our future, is I want them to be healthy. I want them to be inspired to learn, to be well educated, but to have aspirations for what they want to be and what they can be. I want them to have the skills to succeed in the 21st century, and I want them to have the opportunity to have a job in Vermont and live, work, and stay right here if they choose to. Now, I have a plan that really focuses on getting more kids beyond high school, because right now we do a great job in Vermont getting kids through high school, highest graduation rates in this country, but a terrible job when it comes almost bottom of the nation to continuation beyond high school. And that's why I have a plan called Vermont Promise. 2 years tuition-free education at the Community College of Vermont or Vermont Technical College, so that we can get kids who otherwise wouldn't the opportunity and the aspiration to get qualified for livable wage jobs, so they can have economic security and stay here in Vermont. This is the opportunity gap that we are missing, because our businesses can't find qualified workers. And if we don't get more kids beyond high school, we will never break the generational cycle of poverty that is growing throughout Vermont and across this nation. We must think about early childhood education so kids have a strong start, and education beyond high school. It is the full continuum of education that we need for our future.
Thank you. Next question, we're going to start with you, Sue. Would you encourage Vermont youth to engage in sports and other activities? If so, how?
Well, absolutely I would. First of all, having been a youth soccer coach for 13 years, both my daughter and son, I coached their teams from pre-K through middle school. And what I experienced as a coach, and obviously for myself as well, because I was an athlete also in college, is how much those activities got me away from screen time, and how much our engagement with young people did the same. Now, we have a very economically diverse communities. Sometimes as a coach, I needed to go pick up the kids from their homes, get them rides to the games, make sure they had cleats. And I saw the range of homes that we went back to, sometimes bringing them back to a mobile home where parents were not available. And I know that this activity not only made them engaged in health and fitness, but in team, and got them out of that home. I love team sports because of how much we work together to get great things, and I always tried to make sure every player would find the best in their game. But I also know that sports is not for every kid. So as much as I love sports, and I want to make sure those opportunities are available, I know that kids who don't do sports can be bullied. I want to make sure there are after-school activities of all sorts: music, writing, poetry slams, shop class, the generator space that I went to in Burlington, where high school kids and Vermont Tech kids are working together on new ways of creation. We have to make sure kids don't go home to an empty home without nutrition, and they don't go home to more screen time where they might be bullied. We need them to stay engaged with their minds, with their bodies, with their friends, and with their community.
Thank you, Phil.
Well, yes, I would. Extracurriculars, I think, in school give students a chance to explore other interests. I believe it enhances as well the social skills that are necessary throughout their life. I think that that's probably underutilized in that respect. I think also sports, the theater, music, clubs, they all teach teamwork and expand that knowledge base as well. And you may not know this about me, but I played the trumpet from grade school right up through high school. And it was a great experience for me, something I probably can't play the trumpet today, but it was something that I really got involved in. And I also was involved in Cub Scouts, played Little League Baseball, played Pee Wee hockey, and activities like this teach and help keep students busy and with positive experiences, and they're valuable learning experience in their life. And you look back on those and reflect on that, and I think it's a really, really important time in your life. I also think about working on a team because it enhances almost any experience, but especially education. In my life, with teamwork, I've always benefited from being part of a good, positive team. And I think whether that's in racing, which I've been fairly successful at, business, politics, and even family. It's all team related. How you work with others, how you bring people together, bring out the best in people, and how you work together pulling in the same direction. So programs like music and dance and debate keep kids active and help teach these lessons early in life. So I would encourage this through supporting partnership initiatives with community organizations, businesses, and I find when a community really gets behind an initiative like this, it means there's a true call for it. And it means that it has a chance for success as well, because everyone's behind it.
Thank you. Are we going to rebut each other on school sports? Okay.
I don't know how you know about that.
Oh, okay. All right. You guys are a team on this one. All right. Okay. So the next question is rather serious in nature. Many of Vermont's children are impacted by their parents' substance abuse, particularly with regard to opioids. How do you plan to address the heroin epidemic? And this time we'll start with Phil and then go to Sue. Go ahead.
Well, it is an issue that is greatly impacting Vermont. As many of you probably know, I haven't always agreed with everything Governor Shumlin has done. But that was when he brought this out in the State of the State address, I somewhat questioned whether this was the right approach. But I have to admit that he was right. And this was something that was like the canary in the mine shaft. And it's really gotten worse, much worse than that. Addressing this opioid epidemic is one of the most challenging tasks I think we're going to face. And I've released a comprehensive 10-point economic plan that encompasses prevention, enforcement, and treatment. It's a three-legged stool from my perspective. And you can look at that on philscott.org if you want to take a look at the whole plan in itself. But in addition to replicating community-based models, I would establish a director of drug policy prevention right off the bat. And this person would report directly to me. And also, I would establish a council to strengthen our statewide approach to addressing this incredible crisis. I would also implement digital prescriptions to reduce prescription forgery and duplication, and that contributes to the fraud as well. Sheriff Marcoux up in Lamoille County established a program a while ago about a take-back program with prescription drugs. And he told me about the successes a couple of years ago and said we've taken back about 6,000 pounds over this weekend. And I thought to myself, 6,000 pounds, that's an incredible amount. And I said, but, you know, being the first year, I was thinking maybe there's a lot of pent-up demand and inventory. And then he told me this was the second or third year, and they collected 5,000 or 6,000 pounds in the years previous to that. So that tells me we have a problem here on our hands, and it's about overprescribing. But we also have to have enforcement. And I think we need to allow law enforcement more flexibility like they did in Gloucester. And there's all kinds of other ways, I guess I have my time's up, but all kinds of other ways that we're going to have to, it's all hands on deck on this one.
Okay, thank you. Sue?
I am gravely concerned about the opiate epidemic, and as I've traveled the state, I have seen its impact and learned more and more of its impact in every corner, in every community. Probably the most compelling story I heard was a woman in Rutland who described that her daughter came home from middle school saying, "Mommy, is it normal to have needles in your backpack?" She went to the middle school principal and learned that the mother of that child had actually put her needles into her daughter's backpack to keep herself from using. It's extraordinary what's happening. And I will tell you that my plan as governor is to appoint an opiate crisis manager. Now, you may know I had the opportunity after Tropical Storm Irene to be the crisis manager after the storm. I was in the governor's office, an appointee dealing with this crisis 24/7. And like my opiate crisis manager, we will have the opportunity, as I did, to think holistically and comprehensively and consistently about the challenge. We have to be dealing with enforcement. The enforcement community in this state doesn't collaborate or communicate. We have municipal, county, and state troopers. They need to be a team. We need to focus more on prevention and treatment, and we need to understand where the challenges are and how we best address them. We need to look at prescribing habits, and we need to bring the pharmaceutical industry to the table. When we have a task force with a leader who sets goals and measures our progress, that's how we did it in Irene, and that's how we need to become in managing this crisis, which is taking us on. Now, last week, Phil mentioned that this was his plan, but I will tell you, because I have been traveling around this state in forums like this, talking about this very issue and this very solution, I am glad we are on a similar page. I know that we need a crisis manager at this level.
Thank you both. All right, so now we're going to talk about an issue that's, I know, of great importance here locally, and that's Act 46, and we're going to start with Sue. Please comment on your view of Act 46 and its implementation. Are improvements needed? And if so, what would you propose?
Well, Act 46 has been an extraordinary challenge for so many communities. I will tell you the first and foremost that I think our public schools in this state, I know, are some of the best in the country. And as your governor, I don't want to do anything to undermine our strong public schools. And the goal really is to address what we know is a huge challenge, the declining enrollment in our schools, both that has begun and will continue. And it's asking communities to do some very hard work, to come together in a larger group to create unified governance structure. Now, what I've observed is that in some communities, particularly in more densely populated parts of Vermont, this is actually already working and making sense. My own community voted over 80% to unify. And we're going to see improvements for opportunities for kids and efficiencies and cost savings. But if there's one thing I have learned traveling this state, I know that every community is different and every district is very different. What I will propose as governor is to extend the current timeline on making that district decision. We have communities who are having this conversation for the very first time. I do have faith in our ability to come together in Vermont. I've seen it happen. But we can't rush this process, which is extraordinarily important to our kids. And I think we need to be flexible as we go forward. There is no one size fits all, particularly in Vermont. And we cannot undermine the wonderful schools we have, but we have to think differently. We have to recognize declining enrollment is serious. We have to think about how we might use our schools differently. For example, when there's schools with students that are too few for the school to make financial sense, how about we move from a K through 8 to an early childhood through 3rd grade and use the other half of the building for social services, for mental health services, and oral health.
Thank you. Phil?
Well, Act 46 certainly isn't perfect, and it wasn't something that I would have crafted at the time, but this was a result, if you back up a bit, it was a result of the screams for property tax relief from Vermonters. We heard it, we've been hearing it for the last decade plus about the high cost of living, the crisis of affordability that we face here in Vermont. So at the legislature decided to pass this bill. It was crafted in a hurried fashion, passed at the last minute, and it has its share of problems. But I will say, at least it started the conversation, the essential conversation of how do we pay for this education system that we have with this declining population. So I would see Act 46 as needing improvement. I believe that we should have some clarity in terms of school choice. I think school choice is really, really important. I think competition is important. And so I would advocate for clarification in that area. I also would like to see some more latitude within the law. I'd like to see more carrots and sticks. I think that works better. There have been many who have said that we should just do away with Act 46, but that wouldn't be fair to all of those school boards that have struggled so much, those communities that have worked at this so hard over the last year to implement. So we need to strengthen, of course, the cost provisions, the cost containment provisions to achieve real property tax reform and reduction. We should follow the Pikus report. This is a report that the Joint Fiscal Office did, nonpartisan office that came up with $165 million in efficiency savings that's available to us. And it doesn't impact quality from their standpoint. And I believe that we need to make sure that we let communities keep what they save. I think that's an incentive. If you find savings, I think those communities should be able to keep it. So there's some clarity there and some improvements to be made to Act 46.
Are we all set? No rebuttals? You guys are going to tell me, right? When you have rebuttals? Sure. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with Phil this time. And the question is, or rather, I guess there's a statement, then a question. Evidence shows that mentoring encourages youth to volunteer and to rise to leadership roles. How would you encourage youth mentoring in our state?
Well, there are all kinds of leadership programs that build on mentoring relationships, and I think we need to and should encourage participation in all of those. The National Mentoring Partnership estimates, I believe they estimate that 1 in 3 of young Vermonters will go through childhood without a naturally occurring structured mentoring relationship, and of the 1 of 3, it's believed to be 18,000 of our youth would meet the definition of that risk. I'll work with mentoring organizations who are really the experts in the field on this matter to find ways we can encourage more adults to participate in mentorship programs and close that gap between available mentors and Vermont children that are truly in need. I said this recently when I toured I toured the Boys and Girls Club in Chittenden County. And they do a great job there in trying to bridge the gap and trying to help those at-risk youth, specifically with some of their diverse ethnic backgrounds there. I think it's essential, and they've done, again, some great work in that regard. On principle, I believe that everyone should volunteer in some capacity at some point in their life, whether it's in sports or scouting or public service. There are really many opportunities for all of us to get involved and lead by example. And I think that we should be all trying to advocate for that. We have a responsibility to give back in life. Some choose public service, but there are other avenues, such as, again, mentorship and trying to help kids that are really our future here in Vermont.
Thank you, Sue.
I think mentoring is a terrific opportunity for transforming lives. And we have so many serious issues that we have to address with young people in our state and across the country. I mentioned earlier that over 40% of our children are coming to kindergarten unready to learn. This is the result of increasing poverty, increasing adverse childhood experiences that hold children back. And then through the middle school and high school years, we have increasing challenges that worry me greatly. And I think you know that we are among a very high suicide rate for adolescents. According to the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, right now almost 20% of middle and high school students consider themselves clinically depressed. And what's worse, 12% of middle and high school students have developed a suicide plan. We need adults and peers to be there for one another. We are at a very different time than when I grew up. People are stressed not only by lack of access to affordable housing, nutrition, but the kind of relationships we used to have when we didn't have to have two income-earning adults. And right now, we have a situation demographically where the predominance of single-headed households, mostly female-headed households. I want you to know that my Vermont Promise Plan, tuition-free community and technical college, includes a commitment that every student will have a volunteer mentor. This program is based on what's happening in 4 other states, and I've been in touch with the folks at Tennessee Promise. And they explain that mentoring is the most important part because kids are actually deciding in 6th grade not to go on to college. They need that champion to help them through the process, to believe in them and to be their champion, to know that they can get a strong start, an opportunity for success, a livable wage jobs, and real economic opportunity.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? You know, it's exciting when you guys do that, so I hope we try it again.
Maybe the closing statement.
Oh, okay. All right. You know, before we move on, my cell phone says 5:42 and the clock says 5:55, which is right. Oh, okay, so we have time.
You're always right.
Oh, yeah. Even when I'm wrong, huh? Okay. So that means we have time for more questions, so that's good. So we're going to start with Sue and then Phil. This is about work readiness and civic engagement. What do you feel is most important in preparing Vermont youth for adulthood?
Well, I'll go back to my vision. We need kids to be healthy. We need kids to have the opportunity for skills and education. We need them to find their passion. We need them to aspire to improve their lives and the lives of others around them. And we need to create those opportunities. I had the incredible opportunity to talk with a group of high school students a couple of weeks ago. And I asked them how many of them would want to, are planning to leave after high school, to leave Vermont. Almost every single hand went up. And then I said, if you had the opportunity, how many of you would want to stay? Almost every hand went up. That's why we need to make sure we have more opportunities for them to stay. But the other thing I had a wonderful opportunity is, why did they want to stay? What is it that they love about Vermont? They all talked about community, being part of something where people knew them. They said the store owners knew them. They could go to the grocery store and actually buy the vegetables that they had been a part of gleaning and cleaning at their farm. They talked about how much we care about one another in Vermont. And they've been to other places and see that it isn't the same. We need to make sure we continue those wonderful values that make Vermont so special. And that's what I think prepares our young children to be great adults in the world. I've seen it from my daughter, who's beyond college now, and her peers who go out and come back, and how much they've been able to, I think, share what's so special about those important values. But I want them to be able to come back and have the jobs of the future. That's why I believe we need to make sure that we are supporting our businesses by growing the workforce that they need to grow.
Time. Thank you.
So we should look at the problem that we're facing at this point in time. We have this population that's stagnant here in Vermont. We have about 625,000 people. It's been that way for the last couple of decades. But what's shifting really is that demographic. We're getting older. I mean, we just have to look around the room. We see fewer of our youth here, and that's what we need to do. We need to focus on that. We have 30,000 less people in the category of 25 to 45 over the since the last census, really. So that's the issue, because those are the folks, you think about that, those are the folks that they buy homes, they have families, they utilize services, they buy products, and they pay taxes on top of that. So if we have less of them, then we're in trouble, because it puts the burden on the rest of us that are still here. So we have to focus on that. We have to solve this problem before us. So I think we have to start by thinking about the kids, and I think that we should be looking at apprenticeships, internships, trades education to learn more of those life skills. It's also important that we have kids have to learn structure in their lives. That's some of the social skills that we're missing. And some of those that I see coming into the workforce and come to our place for employment, they lack that structure in life. I think also increasing innovation in our public school system is key. One size doesn't fit all. It didn't fit me. It doesn't fit a number of students. So they need some latitude. They need, for myself, it was more about technical education. I took my college prep in the morning, and I went into the vocational program in the afternoon. And there was a certain stigma attached to that. And I felt like I was somehow in between those two worlds. And I think we have to break down those walls, because I think we need to increase the utilization of science, technology, engineering, math. I think that's important. But we also need to have a serious discussion about public school choice.
Yes, I have a rebuttal.
You do? Oh, good. I love it when that
I knew
happens.
you wanted me to spice it up. And so I have a minute, is that right?
Yes.
You know, Phil, you've talked a lot about increasing the population, but frankly, I really haven't seen any plans to do something about these challenges. I do have plans. I've proposed Invest Vermont and Innovate Vermont, investing in our downtowns and villages to create livable wage jobs, to support entrepreneurs, to make sure we have more housing choices for Vermonters, to create those communities that young people want to live in. Look, this is everywhere across this country, rural states are in population decline and economic decline. We're not declining, we're stagnant. When we create more vibrant communities, I have met young entrepreneurs excited and optimistic about the future. I also have a program called VT Outdoors, capitalizing on our assets, our great recreational opportunities, getting more industries, outdoor industries here, creating more out of our wonderful mountain biking, our ski areas, making sure we are actually capturing those industries that young people want to come to. And one of the fastest growing one is the green energy economy.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I thought you were about to rebuttal.
Okay. All right.
I finally got to say that. So, Sue, you probably didn't see my economic plan because you were debating the empty chair at Tunbridge, but I did release that plan, and it's fairly extensive. Your plan is about 1 page long. I think mine is about 40-something pages long. So there's quite a bit of information there. Actually, one part of it is about affordable housing, and I think that that's essential as we move forward. Part of the plan is to create tax incentives so that we can develop more affordable housing for the workforce, not just for low income, but the workforce. And that's what we really have to focus on as well, about creating a program where someone that wants to buy a home, fix it up, can flip that house, and maybe 3 or 4 of them a year without capital gains. And I think that would incentivize some to create more of the affordable housing with the caveat that they be energy efficient. I think there has to be a certain standard so we don't put the burden on them afterwards. But there are many parts of that plan. I urge you to look at philscott.org and you'll see that.
Wow, well, that was great. Thanks. Thank you. The next question is, do you plan to strengthen any existing programs for school-age youth or introduce any new ones? And this is, we'll start with you, Phil. And this could include pre-K if you want, but this is really about basically the public school system. And are there any new programs that you would introduce or existing ones? And so anyway.
Well, again, I think many people have tried to pigeonhole me as this Republican that doesn't want to do anything about education. But I really actually am a believer of pre-K. I think the science is real and that we have to do whatever we can during those early days when the minds are developing. And I think that we should have more pre-K and across the board. But we're going to have to find ways to pay for that. We can't continue down this path. We're spending, as I said before, $1.6 billion to educate 86,000 kids, one of the highest per pupil costs in the nation. And we can do better. We're going to have to deliver this 21st century education in a much different way. More interactive learning, trying to work together, trying to share in resources. I think it's going to take all of us in order to do that. Think outside the box and how we do that and deliver that. But I also want to reintroduce some of those life skills that I think are essential. Like I said, I think technical education is important. I think exploring some of those avenues. Not everybody is going to work on Wall Street. There are going to be some of us in the trades. And I think that's essential as we move forward. There's a dignity in working, dignity in physical work. And I think that exploring those avenues is really, really important. You know, things like understanding electricity, exploring that is something about, you know, AC/DC isn't just a great band. I think you can learn something from that, you know, actually voltage and amperage and so forth. It's something you explore in your future, and they could become an electrical engineer in the future as well, and working for NASA. You just never know where that's going to take you. So exploring, you know, revitalizing that, I think it's going to be essential to the future as well. And I just think that we've just lost sight of that. Financial literacy as well. We don't teach that enough in schools.
John.
So.
Thank you. Sue?
Well, I think there's so many important programs that we need to continue to build upon. Absolutely implementing universal pre-K. We have a long way to go, but it really needs to begin at early childhood. We don't have a system of early childhood care, and it is the most important time when our child's brains are developing. I'm excited about the personal learning plan and the opportunity that we have to really mix up. We can no longer have traditional education with where kids are at and how they're learning today. The job is and the goal is to help our young people find their passion, find their aspiration. That's what the personal learning plan helps them do, beginning really in middle school with getting young people to think about their future in ways that really build upon their excitement and their passion. So I want to build upon that and expand opportunities for internships. I want to continue to grow the dual enrollment, which not only gets people further into their college, reducing their debt, but helps them be exposed to so much more than they might be otherwise if they are ready for that chance. I've told you about Vermont Promise, making sure we get as many kids as we can beyond high school, because it is critical to getting our businesses the workers they need and growing our economy and making sure our children and our young people thrive. But I have a specific goal, which is to go from our current 40% to getting 75% of kids beyond high school training or education by 2025. I know that when we set goals and we measure ourselves, that's when we can achieve them. And when we have kids aspiring to go beyond high school, because right now it used to be enough to get a high school diploma, and in the 21st century it is not. So many parents aren't tuned into that, are burdened with their own financial challenges. That's why we have the volunteer mentor system.
Sorry. Okay, so I've been invited to ask a few questions of my own. They're not on your list, but they're going to be education related, so don't freak out. We'll start with you, Sue. What kind of person would make an ideal secretary of the Agency of Education?
Well, someone who has been here for a while, particularly through the last 5 years of transformation. Someone who can look at the data and think about the trends and understand the unique challenges of our special system in Vermont. Someone who is thinking and driving towards the future, but understanding and connecting with the difficult challenges we have, whether it is the challenges that some families have affording to live here, homelessness, nutritional challenges, or whether it is in fact the difficulty of traveling so far from one school to another when we are trying to create districts where mountain ranges literally divide them. I want someone who cares, who listens, who communicates well, and who can help facilitate this very important discussion about how we are going to address a very significant continuation of declining enrollment and how we can come together as a state to move us forward.
Thank you. Phil?
As with any secretary or commissioner that I would appoint, I will look for talent. I believe that that's really important. It isn't about a political appointment. It isn't about a political favor. It's about trying to find people that have background in that whatever area that you appoint to, but also are objective and have lived life and experienced life in maybe a different way, and able to manage a budget. Understanding how difficult that is, I think, is important to me. And also to have the economy on the backs of their minds, or maybe on the front. Because I think this election is all about the economy. I've talked about this before. We're really, we have less people working than we did 7 years ago. Our workforce is shrinking. And we're raising taxes and fees at an enormous rate that's unsustainable. And I think that we're going to need someone to look to the future, to look at trying to educate in a much, much different way. Like I said before, if we had a $1.6 billion and we asked any of you to come up with a program that would educate those kids, I would dare say they do it in a much different way. And I'm looking for an education secretary that is willing to look outside the box in order to figure that out and help bring people together, and so that we can do things differently. Because the approach we're taking right now isn't working, and I think that we deserve better. Our kids deserve better, and it's part of our future, and it's essential.
Thank you. Yes.
I'd like to rebut.
Okay.
Phil, you've made a few claims that I've heard previously that I really want to rethink. You say that the workforce is shrinking. There's no question that we have an aging workforce and that more and more people are retiring, and yes, there are changes in jobs. But the number of jobs in our economy has actually grown significantly. So I think it's more important to think about the number of jobs rather than individuals entering or leaving the workforce. Another number I don't understand is this number of $700 million that you're talking about in growth of fees and taxes. I believe that $700 million is the increase in the state budget. Now that state budget involves many revenue sources, including federal revenues, including during a time when Tropical Storm Irene hit. And I was quite involved in working incredibly hard with our federal delegation to advocate that we get more federal dollars into our state so we didn't have to raise the taxes that we would have otherwise had to.
I guess I want to rebut the rebuttal, I think, at this
Okay,
point.
good.
I'm not sure if there was a question for me or if that was the way it was working, but in any respect, $700 million is real. I don't care whether you're talking about state dollars or federal dollars, there's still taxes, there's still burdening Vermonters in some way, some capacity. And I think that we're moving in the wrong direction. I believe that we have to live within our means. I'm frugal by nature. I've run a business for most of my life, and I've gone through the ups and downs of doing that. I've had a lot of sleepless nights wondering how to make payroll. I've had a lot of sleepless nights wondering where the next job's going to come from, how I'm going to keep my employees going, their families going, keep them employed. And it leads me to the fact that I believe as a state, we can't continue down this path. We can't ask Vermonters to pay anymore. I think that we need to live within our means. I think we have to grow the economy. I think if we focused on that instead of all the other things that we're doing, I think we would lead to a much more prosperous Vermont. 2 years ago, we had a legislative session, 2-year biennium, that had 1,211 bills were introduced. 30 of those would have had a positive effect on the economy, and only 3 passed.
Time.
That's not good enough.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. So my question is the current property tax system working? Would you change it? If so, how? Starting with Phil and ending with Sue. You first, yeah.
You know, this has come up a lot over the last number of years. We talked a little bit before about the screams for relief. I mean, that's what we hear a lot of about their property taxes, that they're growing at an enormous rate. And a lot of that is due to our demographics, our population. And again, trying to have a system. We're spending $1.6 billion for 86,000 kids. And that's why it's essential that we think outside the box and do something different than we're doing today. Many have advocated for going to some income-based mechanism. I would say that we probably have that now in some respects because of the subsidies that are available up to, I think it's $120,000 at this point. But regardless, I'm willing to take a look and see if there's another funding formula that would work. And maybe we've outgrown the one we have now. But if we're not willing to address the spending side, then I'm not willing to move forward. Because regardless of how you pay for it, regardless of the system you use, you're still paying, you're still spending the money. And that's the problem. You're just rearranging the deck chairs. And that's, again, not good enough. We need to do more than that. We need to be efficient, trying to, again, develop a new way of educating, a 21st century way of educating our youth for the future, and utilize services together, work together for the common good across Vermont. So I'm not willing to move in that direction unless we have a conversation in tandem about our spending.
Thank you. Sue?
Yeah, I want to talk about the property tax, but first I want to respond to something that Phil said, you know, spending sleepless nights. I want to admit that I also spent many sleepless nights during Irene, wondering how towns like these, who had infrastructure damage that was 6 times their annual budgets, and what were they going to do? And how were people going to get to work if we didn't rebuild 500 miles of road and hundreds of bridges and thousands of culverts? And when we got hundreds of millions of dollars from FEMA, and by the way, it took advocacy, it took battles, and I'm very proud of the dollars we brought back, and the way in which our revenues into our state budget grew and created jobs and contracting jobs, including to your own company. This is what some of the investments in our state budget are making. This is about growing our economy. It is about fixing challenges. And we cannot back off of looking at the challenges. That's what my program, Invest Vermont, looks to make sure we are building infrastructure investments to create more vibrant communities. In terms of property taxes, I think we have an enormous challenge with our property tax challenge. That is the issue that I hear most of all. Now, how are we trying to address that? What are the biggest cost drivers? It is really the nexus of the discussion around how do we restructure our governance, because we have too many assets for the too few students. But it is also about healthcare costs. Healthcare costs are rising exponentially, and that's what's breaking the budgets of our families, our school budgets, and driving our property taxes and our state budget. So really what we need to focus on is reducing healthcare costs, because without that, none of these problems are going to get solved. We're not going to manage the state budget. We're not going to be able to reduce your property taxes. Do we need to think differently about our so-called formula? Yes, I think we do. I think people are frustrated not knowing enough about how their local decisions affect their property tax.
Thank you. So are we ready for final statements? No more rebuttals? No? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, Sue, we'll give you you'll go first. Final statement, and then Phil. Thank you all. We'll hold our applause to the very end, please. Thanks.
Well, thank you all for having me here today and for this important conversation about our youth and our future. You know, I think we've had a chance to talk about some of the important issues facing young people, as well as a chance to see some of our different approaches. I want to say that I've had just an extraordinary privilege in my life to work side by side with Vermonters in towns throughout our state when they came together to rebuild after a crisis. And I've seen that what is possible when Vermonters come together in a united mission. And there's nothing we can't accomplish. We are not facing a natural disaster now, but we do have many, many challenges, and we've talked about some of them today. Too many families are really struggling to make ends meet. Our businesses can't find qualified workers. Communities are reeling from an opiate epidemic. Our young people are saddled with debt or worried about their future, and so are their parents. We have enormous environmental challenges, and people have lost faith in government. I have to tell you that I believe in Vermont, and I'm optimistic about our future. And I know that our young people will amaze us if we give them the skills and the opportunities that they need. So I'm asking for your vote for governor to ensure that we can grow economic opportunity for the next generation with early childhood education and 2 years of tuition-free community or technical college so they can have a path to a good paying job and our businesses can have the workforce they need to grow. I want to make our communities strong and safer by investing in infrastructure, affordable housing, and entrepreneurs. And I want to attack the opiate epidemic straight on. Whether it's been working with thousands of Vermonters to rebuild homes, businesses, and communities after Tropical Storm Irene, I have a track record of facing challenges head-on, setting goals, and accomplishing those goals. And that's the kind of governor I'll be.
Thank you. Phil?
Well, again, thank you very much for having us here today. And I've made it a practice in both my political and personal life to treat others the way I expect to be treated, with respect and civility. This is another area where Vermont, I think, leads in the nation and can benefit our country. And that's what I'd like to end on, the importance of leadership. We have a deficit of faith and trust in our government, both here in Vermont and across the nation. And if we want to change the dysfunction in DC, I think it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to make sure that we lead by example, that we act appropriately in our own backyards. It's about instilling that faith and trust that's been lost. And when you get right down to it, our ability to make Vermont an even more inviting place for working families and jobs, grow the economy, make our state more affordable, give our kids the best education possible. All these things are tied to one common element, and I believe that's leadership. It's going to take strong, courageous leadership, the ability to listen, to build consensus, to set priorities, and to manage projects in order to make real progress here in Vermont. And there's going to be some difficult decisions, regardless of who becomes governor. But it's essential that we all tell the truth, don't overpromise, and always, always follow through. Because in the long run, with the proper leadership, clear priorities, and team chemistry, I believe the opportunities are limitless for us, and it really is within our grasp and within our hands. I hope you'll give me the opportunity to serve you as Vermont's next governor, and I promise you, I will not let you down.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you, audience. This was a great evening.